Brandon, Daniel, we all just got to see about half an hour of Super Mario RPG for the Nintendo Switch, the remake that is coming out in mid-November. We're recording this in late October, but when you see it, it'll be a few days after that. So we've all just seen it. We've all just had an eyes-on demo with the game. Nintendo invited us to, well, like a virtual demo of the game. So we weren't in the same room. We didn't get to play it, but we did get to watch a member of the Treehouse play through roughly half an hour of the upcoming remake of Super Mario RPG. And I think we all have some thoughts. We were kind of excitedly chatting about it in a DM between ourselves while we were walked through a small portion of the game. We were in Moleville coal mines, which I'm struggling to say those words. It's quite early in the morning here where I'm recording. But yeah, it was, well, we all have some impressions. So I don't want to start off giving my own impressions because I could go on forever, and there are 4 of us here. So I want to start with our resident Mario guy, which is now his official title. If you haven't watched his Mario Wonder review, go do that now. Brandon, let me hear your initial thoughts after having seen Super Mario RPG in action for the first time.
I think I could put it into 2 words pretty succinctly, and that would be wowie and also zowie. What struck me right off the bat is just how beautiful the game is. Like, you compare it to the original Super Nintendo version, and it's like insane. Obviously, there's a lot of decades in between the 2 versions of the game, but the spinning stars that were on some of the buildings were really standing out to me. A lot of the details are just super sharp. I found the lighting to be really pleasant to look at, especially inside the coal mines with the torches. Game is just gorgeous. If you want a nice visually updated version of Mario RPG, that's definitely what's being delivered here.
Yeah, it looks so clean. And one little thing I noticed too is we saw a little bit outside of Mario's house, and there are little slight environmental effects. Like now the leaves kind of slightly sway in the wind, where of course they didn't before. Little things like that. It's just kind of touch up the visual pizzazz that little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Brandon touched on something important. It's a very faithful remake. Like, this is not a reimagining. This is not, there is new stuff added, which we didn't see today, but it is very clear that they have taken the SNES original and they have just made that with modern visual techniques. But we haven't heard yet from Daniel. What's your initial take, Daniel?
Yeah, like when you look at it, just the perspective, everything is just exactly the same as you remember it. It's the same angle. It's everything that you're just familiar with. The animations are pretty much one-to-one as well. Like, there's no actual, like, it's hard to describe because obviously they're putting a lot of work into this, but there's no like new animations or anything. They're just taking what you knew from the sprite art and adapting it to these 3D models that we know and love, and everything is looking just very nice. It's sounding very nice as well. I noticed a lot of the music that we heard, all the music that you're hearing, there's like more layers to it now. So like when it gets to the end of one loop, there's like now a new section of this music that you hear now. Like even on the world map, I wish they see it on the world map a little bit longer, because there was a section that I never heard before as it kept going, and that's true for like the battle music, the mines themselves. It's just, there's a lot of love put in this all over the place, and it's looking wonderful.
Yeah, the dungeon theme in particular always had a really short loop in the original, and now there's a lot more to that particular theme. Totally agree. The one thing I'm going to disagree with, Daniel, you're so right, the animations are one-to-one, but there is one new animation that I have to call out. 3 words: level up dance. When your party members level up now, they do a little dance, and it's so good.
Yeah, I do absolutely love that they introduced that little thing. I do want to kind of roll back to the animation talk, though. The level up dance is really cute, and according to the folks at the Treehouse, everybody, including Bowser, has those dances, so I can't wait to see them.
Oh, yeah.
But there is, I personally, as an old head Mario fan, really appreciate the level of trueness, the way they're sticking to the original source material, because the style of animation in Super Mario RPG is something that has kind of gone away in the intervening decades since the original came out. 16-bit RPGs were kind of known for that style of animation that exists in Super Mario RPG, where characters might just do kind of like a funky like raise of the arms or kind of spin around in place to deliver emotion, right? Because frankly, 16-bit consoles weren't powerful enough to do a whole lot more than that. And I think that if you changed those, you would fundamentally be changing some of what gives Mario RPG its charm. There's a specific part in the demo we saw where Bowser is trying to rally his troops. And you know, he's doing so by just kind of grumbling and like raising his arms repeatedly. And I'm like, that is 100% what you would see in a 16-bit RPG back on the SNES in the day. So I really appreciated seeing those animations, you know, continue to be as simplistic as they were, because I think a little something that gave Mario RPG its magic would have been lost otherwise.
Yeah,
I agree.
Bowser's always a joy to watch whenever he's on screen, and he has his voice. He has his actual like Bowser voice now instead. And yeah, you see like his troops are animating. The Goombas have no way to animate, so what they did was they have them roll around, and you saw that in there as well. Like they had to work with these constraints that they had back in the day, and they're keeping that and adapting it to this new style. And I'm glad that they're keeping that feel. It's kind of rigid in ways, but it's charming. It has its own unique charm from back in those like Super Nintendo era 16-bit RPG days.
Yeah, they didn't. It is a very, very faithful remake visually. They didn't fix what isn't broke, and I think it's to the game's strength that they're not losing that kind of 16-bit era charm. They didn't try to overhaul the way the game looks. It is very, very faithful one-to-one just with modern tech, and I think that was the way to go here.
The original Super Mario RPG, it's really hard to think about it in these terms now because of the intervening years since it came out, but it was a technical showcase when it launched on the SNES way back in the 90s. There weren't a whole lot of games that looked the way that Mario RPG looked. You know, it fits in with a small group of like Donkey Kong Country and stuff like that really pushed what the SNES was capable of. These were pseudo 3D graphics at the time. So one of the big appeals as somebody who was around back then was that this was one of the best looking SNES games on the market. And visually, the Switch version of Super Mario RPG really pushes the envelope for what the Switch is capable of. There's really excellent use of lighting here. The models are really detailed and crisp, you know, while maintaining that original kind of squat, chubby Super Mario RPG art style that we all kind of know and love. It looks basically like they took the renders from the promotional art in the 90s and just brought them to life on the Switch. And I'm here for it. I absolutely love how this looks. The Treehouse even told us that they were still going to have Mario deliver exposition by like morphing into other characters and stuff like that, which I'm really excited to see because I don't know about you guys, but for me, every character model I've seen so far was just, I mean, it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
There's really nothing to complain about from a visual standpoint. Even the menus got a nice upgrade, and they still have some of those fun like little character patterns that are in the background. I noticed on the menu screen where you see your party. They're faint, but they're still there. And that gave a lot of character to the original game on Super Nintendo, and it's nice to see that that wasn't lost.
Right.
They had like a lot of those little crayon drawings of like boos or stars in the background. I'm glad, I noticed that too. The UI looks overall nicer. I know some people complain about like the battle UI, how it looks a bit plain, but one thing that I was excited for was to see that the ABXY, they kept the Super Famicom colors, because in the Super Famicom version of this game, that color scheme was red, blue, yellow, and green, while in the Western release, because we did not have those colors on the original Super Nintendo gamepad. It was just purple, shades of purple. And it looks like now they're across all regions going to be like the multicolor style now, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it looks way better that way, and I agree. The UI just overall has a very clean, streamlined look to it that Daniel, I know you were saying, some were complaining maybe it looks a little bit generic, but overall I think it suits the look of the game well, and as you were saying, Brandon, it doesn't lose that personality from like the drawings you were, like the hand drawn of like the fire flowers and such that you were talking about. It still has that kind of character to it still as well.
Yeah, I mean, and we're talking a lot about how faithful the game is, but there is new stuff. I mean, beyond just the end game boss battles that Nintendo has already shown in trailers for the game. There are some new things. The UI, like Daniel implied, is very modernized. You know, it doesn't look at all like, when you pause it, it doesn't look like an old SNES game. It's got kind of this new, and I'll probably have to lean on Daniel to describe what the hell I'm talking about, but It's got a very modern look to the user interface when you pause it. There's like a little star menu that comes out from the side, and you can see they showed us, what was it, like a bestiary of sorts that included inner thoughts of some of the enemies.
Right.
Yeah.
So instead of just using, the Mallow's ability was called Psychopath in the localization of the original game. Now it's called Thought Peek. And so not only can you now use Thought Peek on enemies in battle to get their thoughts, but that also unlocks their entry in a, as you were saying, Steve, a bestiary where you basically can go through and read new additional information on each enemy, and the writing is often very humorous, very tongue-in-cheek. Also, you get like weaknesses listed and such like that, things like that. So there's like a whole menu element now to all the enemies where you can read more. Every enemy basically has a page where you can read flavor text about them if you use Thought Peek on them in battle.
I think we saw the star slap, and it said, "I am not a slap, and I'm also not a star."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quoted from an annoyed star slap.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
So good.
They pretty much brought Tattle from Paper Mario into Mario RPG, because you would also use Tattle and you would get some more information. And there's also, at least in the Thousand Year Door, you can check afterwards, like, oh, there's information on this character afterwards, I believe. And
Right.
It's interesting to bring that here too as well, because there's a lot of information you can get here. There's a lot of unique, like, little charming little things like that. Like, I don't want to quit from this too quickly, but there's also like a new synopsis as well in along with your journal, and now they kind of update the story as you go along. And some of those entries are specifically written by Malo or Gino, and only those two, not any other character. So it kind of gives them more depth in this game that they didn't have before.
It was called the Scrapbook, I think, like officially in the game it's called the Scrapbook, and I was going to mention that. I love that they're kind of fleshing out Malo and Gino's thoughts on what's going on in the story, and it gives them more character development than what you would have seen in the original.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the new stuff that I've seen so far, and of course that doesn't just extend to the UI. There are some very, very minuscule new things included within the game systems themselves. Specifically, in combat, Treehouse mentioned to us that if you're new with a character, that you will see an exclamation point that kind of shows the timing to get a critical hit. But that it'll only happen for like the first 5 times if you've gotten it. So if you're able to nail that timing 5 times, then they will take that away, basically trusting you that you know and understand the timing of the characters now, and that they'll also show that for block until you get, familiar with that sense of timing as well. But if you fail too many times, which they didn't give us like a specific number of amount of times you have to fail, but that if it senses you're struggling with that timing again, it'll bring those back for you to get reacclimated to landing those crits again. I personally really like the idea because it's the best of both worlds in my opinion. Like for new players, you get the ability to kind of see, okay, this is when I need to hit the button to get the most out of this attack. And for experienced players like all of us, it eventually goes away and you're just kind of left to, okay, I need to know when to hit it and when to get this. I personally think it strikes a really good balance. I hope that they give us the option to just turn it off entirely if we want that old school challenge, but I'm okay with the implementation they've gone with.
Or turn it on, for that matter.
Or turn it on.
Yeah, leave it on.
That's true.
As a kid playing through this, I did find some of the timings to be a little ambiguous because there's not really anything there to guide you. As to where, like, something like Paper Mario, that A button is always on screen when they want you to press it. So there's no question about when you're supposed to. So yeah, this is nice to have.
Yeah,
the original really has like no feedback as to whether you do it correctly or not. Sometimes, like, the sound effects are a little bit different, but sometimes I still don't think I know how to time Thunderbolt. I probably still time it wrong, and I don't understand because the sound effects are all clashing in together. There's no like way to confirm that I did it correctly, or if I'm even doing it in the ballpark.
it does seem as though they're going to have that extra visual feedback to make it so that some of the more vague attacks like Thunderbolt, like you were saying, Daniel. Personally, I was never able to get Geno World down really well. I know obviously you could do 9999 if you time it frame perfect. I was never able to quite figure out when that frame perfect timing is. So it does seem as though there's going to be that, extra visual indicator to help you get that down the first few times you use a specific attack, and I think that's going to really help with the timing on some of the vaguer moves for sure. I know Snowy, for example, I could never get the timing down on that in the original, and this should be a little bit more obvious now, which I think is a good thing.
Speaking of frame perfect, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you frame perfect block, it blocks all damage.
It does.
You're correct.
Yeah.
It's a super guard, sort of. It doesn't
I
counter,
love that.
but it guards all the way, which is really nice.
Yeah, so if you frame perfect a timed defense, it blocks all damage, and if you frame perfect a timed attack, as we've seen in some trailers and such, it'll do splash damage to the entire enemy party, which is interesting because I did specifically ask if enemy stats have been rebalanced around that new addition, and they said they haven't. The enemy stats have not been rebalanced about that, and I'm a little concerned it could make the game, an already easy game, even easier. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But on the other hand, there's something we saw for the first time in our preview this morning that kind of pushes the needle back the other way, and that's special enemies. We hadn't seen that in trailers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we had seen that in trailers up to this point. And special enemies are basically more powerful versions of existing enemies that have buffed up stats, but will guarantee you a frog coin when you defeat them. And from what we saw, well, it was a regular enemy in the Moleville coal mines that was it was designated as a special version of that enemy. And they were doing a lot of damage and taking a lot less damage. Like, those stats were not playing around with those beefed up stats.
Not only does it give you a frog coin, I think it's worth more experience as well, kind of like a metal slime in Dragon Quest.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was interesting because if I remember correctly, when the Treehouse rep that was doing the demo for us was up against those two enemies, one was regular, one was special, they wiped out the regular enemy in a single shot, and then it took a couple go-arounds for the whole party to take out that special enemy, and he almost took out one of the, I think it was Gino that the special enemy almost took out entirely.
Right.
So it was definitely interesting. One thing that we saw that they didn't show us completely, though, was there's a system by which you can wager your experience or your coins. Like, it would just prompt them every time, and they just didn't want to do it. I was hoping we'd get to see what that looks like in the remake, but yeah, it was pretty interesting to see that as well. But of course, we're kind of skirting around like the big addition to battle, right? Which was the triple attacks, like the new triple attacks, which require a meter to fill. But then they're just, I mean, it's basically this game's version of summons, right? Like they've remade these from the ground up, and they look amazing.
I love the animation, just these CG animations that you get that go along with the attacks. But I also love that CG animation wasn't 30 years long. It was nice and brief.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get tired of watching these over and over again because they're not going to eat up all your time.
And importantly, you can't use them over and over again because you have to fill that meter. And at least in the demo we saw, it took several battles to fill that meter all the way up. As you got a chain, and it would only add like 1 to 4% every time, and you have to get it all the way up to 100 to then use that attack once, which drains the meter entirely. So, these are probably best saved for big encounters, boss battles. You're not going to want to just whip this out against a Goomba or something. Like, you're going to want to save it for when it really counts. We only got to see one of them.
That's like throwing the Master Ball at a Pidgey.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they in our demo, they played through the entire Moleville coal mines up to the Croco boss fight, and we only saw one team attack, one triple attack, and that was the whole dungeon, essentially. So, yeah, they could have used it earlier than they did, but they basically saved it for the boss fight. But, it's not as though they just kept filling the meter up and we kept seeing triple attack after triple attack. We only saw one, and it basically took the duration of the entire dungeon to fill that meter.
Yeah, and it wasn't OP either. Like, he hit Croco with it, and Croco still had a lot of gas left in the tank, so it's not going to wipe a boss out either.
Right, and it also depends on your party composition. Every specific party composition that you can build in Mario RPG is going to have its own triple attack, and some of them don't even do damage. Some of them are like support abilities, for example. So it'll be really cool to see which, combination of party members give you specific attacks and different abilities and such.
It was also interesting to see that depending on, speaking of party compositions, there's also chains that you want to keep up and continue with, and continuing those chains will also give buffs to your party. And depending on who's on your party, like if Gino's in your party, your buffs will be on attack and speed. If you have Mallow in your party, it's magic plus. And it's interesting to just kind of it's going to be more. You're gonna be more mindful of how you compose your teams this time, not just on having the same ones every time, because it's with that and also with the triple attacks as well. So having those, there's a lot more layers on here than there used to be, and it's interesting to see.
They were very clear that they haven't added anything new specifically to the main story. Like, you're not going to be seeing new areas, new bosses and such in the main story run, but there are these new post-game challenges where you get super beefed up versions of certain bosses like Booster and whatnot, and Johnny, and we've seen in some trailers that they can do a total party wipe, 9999 to the whole party, and I think that's where we're going to see these additional mechanics really shine, like really having to think about specific party composition, which triple attacks you or triple abilities you get from certain party compositions, and making sure that you're building big timed attack and timed defense chains to get those damage and stat boosts, because those post-game bosses seem like they're genuinely difficult. And I think that's where these additional mechanics are really going to shine.
Assuming there's rematches against all the bosses in the game, that's quite a bit of additional post-game content as well.
Yeah.
So that'll keep you playing.
It's interesting because I normally talk about the fact that RPGs don't demo well. I don't usually get much from watching someone else play an RPG, especially, let alone playing it myself for a brief period of time. But I think that Mario RPG benefited, at least for me, from familiarity with the game because it is such a faithful remake. I know what we're in for, and it's really just kind of seeing the new things they've added. Obviously, the new visuals, stuff like that. One of the things I was really excited about, though, and I'm surprised we haven't fully touched on it, was just flipping back to the original soundtrack and being able to hear that. I thought Ash would have gushed about this in the first 10 seconds of this video.
Everybody expects that. I didn't want to steal the conversation too much, but yes, of course, I do love that you can switch back and forth between the original and remastered soundtracks. And, I mean, for me, I'll probably primarily be playing with the remastered soundtrack just because every second of the original soundtrack is permanently etched into my brain, of course, so I know exactly what all those songs sound like. And I want to hear these new versions of all these songs because, as we know, they're all being done by the original composer, Yoko Shimomura, and she's like the queen, in my opinion. So, and what we've heard, clearly, as you guys are saying, all of it sounds so good, and I just can't wait to hear the whole soundtrack remastered. It's sounding so good from what we've heard so far.
They also said very briefly that certain moments of the game will have the modern soundtrack no matter which setting you have it on. So I'm wondering what situations that's going to include. Is there anything new in this game that we haven't seen before that's going to force the modern soundtrack that didn't exist in the original?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder. Maybe certain cutscenes or something that have been added.
I was going to say that my honest impression of that is that the cutscenes will just have the modern soundtrack.
Could be.
And that you won't be able to listen to it. I mean, I could be wrong. The Treehouse did not clarify, but that's just kind of the way that statement read to me. Is like certain moments to me that just meant cutscenes. Like you go into a cutscene and maybe it's because the cutscenes themselves are pre-rendered the same way that the triple attacks are, or something to that effect. Like maybe there are moments in this game that we haven't seen yet that are just pre-rendered that are not happening in engine, and thus you can't change the music out or something.
That's kind of how I read it as well, but who knows? They didn't specify, as you said, Steve. But so we'll have to see when the game comes out pretty soon.
One sound-related note I wanted to mention, and I messaged this to you guys while we were watching the demo. Text boxes are super silent, and it made some of those conversations feel weird to me. I know the original was like that too, but it's just odd.
Not even like a little boop or something.
Yeah, I'm so used to hearing, like, you hear that. There's like usually a sound effect in a lot of RPGs these days associated with text scrolling, like, and you don't hear that, and there's nothing like that in this game, and it is a little weird.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think game design has evolved since then. There's a sense of tactility to text appearing on screen that you get through that simple act of adding sound to it, right? It draws your attention further, and it feels almost a bit lifeless when you don't have that. But I'm torn. I'm of two minds. Like, I appreciate that they're hewing so close to the source material that you're basically getting a window into what games were like 30 years ago. But then there's also but there are things that have just been objectively positive changes since then, and the part that makes this particular change weird and interesting to me is that Nintendo has clearly taken notes from the last, several decades of game development improvements and added things that they did deem more appropriate. Like one of the things that they mentioned, which was a staple of the 16-bit RPG era that I'm glad is gone now, is that you never knew when you were going to get skills in Mario RPG before. And now they actually tell you, okay, at level 8, Gino gets this. At level 16, he gets this. So they at least tell you like when you can expect to unlock a skill, even if they don't tell you what it is. So they've clearly, looked at certain elements of the game and said, okay, this probably doesn't work as well as it did in the 90s now. So we're going to fix that. So the text box thing is a little weird when you consider that they did make alterations elsewhere.
I think even just a confirmation sound for when you switch from one text box to the next could go a long way, because there's not even that.
And there are other, to be clear, there are other minor quality of life updates on that front. So things like you can equip new weapons and armor right from a shop now. You don't have to buy it and then go to the menu and equip it there. You can just equip it right when you buy it. You can quick heal from the field. You don't have to open the menu and like select group hug, for example. You can just open a quick menu on the field and heal the party. So little things like that, they kind of help streamline the whole experience, I think.
It's interesting how it is on the surface in a one-to-one copy, but then there are smaller things that they've done to modernize the experience to make it feel fresh, and to kind of, I don't know, to comport with the expectations of players, in this day and age versus when it came out. But then you have those small things that are one-to-one for the original and don't make sense. But that is also, to broaden the scope of this discussion a little bit, that's a very Nintendo thing to do. Like, I always throw it back to the example of Animal Crossing and just the layers and layers of dialogue menus that you have to go through to do stuff. Like going to the airport still is like an incomprehensible spider's nest of options that you have to go through just to fly somewhere.
Yeah.
But then the rest of the game is so much more streamlined than original Animal Crossing. They're like, this bit that you're going to use every time you play, though, we're going to make that as cumbersome as possible. Like we designed it in 01 and we just decided to never change. So that is a very Nintendo thing to do. I think that they, it is kind of weird how Nintendo is clearly and visibly getting more modern. Like they are, you look at, again, Mario Wonder, and you see just kind of this breath of fresh air of like creativity and newness and an online experience that's really great. But then you have these kind of confounding decisions in other games they make where you're just like, why? You could have changed that. You could have. But for some reason, you're like, we're leaving that one thing alone. I'm just convinced that someone very senior at Nintendo is like, you will not add feedback to those text boxes.
Yeah.
I don't think we mentioned this. They did add autosaves, which I love. So, like, whenever you lose a battle, you don't get sent back to your last save block save. I think you get sent back to the last screen because it autosaves between screens.
Fantastic.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nintendo. Again, one of the modern things you did. That's really good. That's a very good thing. I like that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I want to get everybody's overall impressions of the demo. I mean, I was already hyped for this. I was very excited for Super Mario RPG before I saw the Treehouse play it for us, because it's one of my favorite 16-bit RPGs of all time. And it was such a weird thing. We live in a world where most of our viewers, most of the people watching this video were not born yet when Mario RPG came out. So they've lived their whole lives in a world where Mario had a turn-based RPG. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Don't make me feel that old. But anyway, but the idea, Ash, and I'm sure you can relate, of hearing that Mario was going to have a turn-based RPG in the era before it happened was just like, what?
Oh, yeah.
Like, in what world? It was like right up there on the bingo card with Mario being added to Doom. Like, it just was not a thing that anybody thought would happen. And now we live in, an age where he's got a whole series of RPGs. But this one, I think, is special for that reason. It's the first, and it is still, out of all of them, in my opinion, the most unique. So getting it back in the spirit in which it was created, in that it pushes the envelope technically, in that it still has this weird, wacky art style to it. It's so faithful while being subtly modernized that I'm just over the moon excited for this. And after having seen it, those expectations, that excitement is that much stronger.
Y'all whippersnappers growing up this day and age are used to having Paper Mario and Luigi. Like, Mario being in the RPG format is nothing new in this day and age. But back in my day, it was something new to see Mario be in his own RPG. And I think there's a lot to be said that the original still does it best in a lot of ways. The Super Mario RPG still, in my opinion, really does stand the test of time, and I think it's something that should be experienced if you love Mario and you love RPGs. And I'm so glad that today's generation of players is going to experience such a formative game for olds like you and I, Steve, who, were around when this game originally came out back in 1996. Good Lord. Good Lord. But yeah, I'm so glad that Nintendo have saw fit to bring this back for a modern generation of players with modern bells and whistles. It is absolutely, I think, a game that is worth experiencing, and it may not be something that a lot of players would have wanted to go back to and visit in its original form. And the fact that it's being brought back in this modernized format, I think, will expand its audience even more, and it should, because this game is really a special game.
I think it's smart of Nintendo to have positioned this before the remake of Thousand Year Door. Because I often find that when people are talking about Mario RPGs, it's usually just Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi. Super Mario RPG gets left out of the conversation a lot. So just putting this in front of people's faces in this big drought of Mario RPGs first, before giving them, Thousand Year Door, which everyone always yells about, I think that's a smart move. Like, give them a taste first. This is what it used to be like, and it could be like that again.
Who knows? Maybe this will herald the arrival of a proper Super Mario RPG 2 someday. You never know.
I think one of the things that I love about this too is that it's coming hot on the heels of Mario Wonder, in that, those two games use art styles that are just not equated with modern Mario. I hope that this is just, kind of the signaling of a change of the guard in that respect, that we're now going to see Mario continue to be experimental and weird and fun in ways that he hasn't been for a long time. Mario's been very safe. That doesn't mean that the games themselves were bad, but it is nice to see Nintendo taking steps to prevent the character from starting to feel stale. Giving us new interpretations of one of the most beloved, if not the most beloved character in all of gaming. I'm here for it, and I can't wait to play Thousand Year Door, but this is the RPG I wanted to get first. I couldn't agree more, Brandon. What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm definitely more excited for for Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door before Mario RPG. I didn't really play Mario RPG until it came out on the Wii Virtual Console. That was the first time I ever played this game. And obviously, like, playing it after Paper Mario, there's a lot of unique experiences that you can't get in Paper Mario that are only in Mario RPG. Obviously, some of the characters here, like Gino and Mallow, have never been seen before in any other game. And just seeing them given all this love and attention now, it just makes me happy. Seeing Mallow's big silly grin when it's his turn in battle, just looking at you with that big smile, it gives me life. Yeah. And and his dance when you're waiting for him to select your bonus for the other characters is fantastic. I think Mallow's going to get a lot more fans now, because if everyone talks about Gino, everyone forgets about Mallow. So hopefully he's going to get more fans from this at this point, because I think he deserves it.
Same.
But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for this game to come out. Obviously, a huge Mario RPG fan in general. But it's a good way to get people anticipating what also is there more to come with the Thousand Year Door coming later next year. But also just because there's a legacy to this title. It's the first Mario RPG that was ever, conceived, and all the RPGs that followed were deriving from what this game picked up and what it originally conceptualized. So being able to see that now in a modern era and see so many people be introduced to Mario RPG now is just really it's going to be magical. Magical to see.
Yeah. One more thing, Steve, I know we're about to wrap up, that I want to leave our audience with before we head out. is that I am so excited to see where this new localization goes. Obviously, Ted Woolsey did a great job with the original script back on Super Nintendo, but they are relocalizing some things, and one thing we saw in our demo, and what I assume was the Caro Caro Cola in the original game, is now called the Croca-Cola, and I love it! I love it so much, and I can't wait.
I do love that.
It's so good. I can't wait to see where some of the newly localized enemy names and item names and stuff go. It's really fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, you touched on it earlier before, but Thought Peak was originally called what? Psychopath?
Psychopath, yeah.
Yeah,
Which is really weird. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of understand it, like psycho space path, I think.
Right.
You know, like separate words.
But that's not how it was written. It was just one psychopath. Yeah, exactly.
Not great, but yeah, I think Thought Peak gets the idea of what it's supposed to be across a lot better.
It's also cuter.
But real quick, before we leave, I want to leave you guys with a question that I asked the Treehouse that they couldn't answer during our demo. Going around the panel, do you think that this can be played entirely with the SNES controller? And if it can, are you going to play it that way?
I think yes. I don't have one, so no.
I think you should be able to. I don't have one, so I'm not going to find out.
Man.
I know, right? I only got one recently, so I guess I can't answer this. You know what? I don't think they're going to do that. Maybe they'll do it in like a post-update patch or like a post-release patch, but I actually get the feeling they're not going to have that in at release, and I'm personally okay with it. I'm fine playing this with the Pro Controller. And on that note, one of the things I was thinking, and I wish I'd remembered to ask, was if there is, I assume there are going to be some haptics with the remake, and I think I love haptics personally. I think they add a lot if they're well considered and well implemented. And so personally, as cool as it would be to have that, be able to play with the Super Nintendo controller, I'd rather have that haptic feedback. So I'm fine playing it with the Pro Controller.
Yeah, I think you might have just changed my mind. I was going to be all aboard playing it with the SNES controller. Now, that being said, I think it will work.
Okay.
I think it'll work because they're so faithful to the game that I can't imagine that you wouldn't be able to navigate your characters around the world without the D-pad. I feel forcing analog in a game that doesn't really need it would be weird. So I think it'll work. But now that you mentioned the haptics, I'm like, damn it, I can't not experience those, and I bet you're right. So
after the music
Pro
blocks,
Controller for me too.
After the music blocks in Mario Wonder played music out of my Pro Controller, I need that.
I do think though that they will let you probably use the D-pad, playing with the Pro Controller. I don't think it'll be analog only. I think they probably will let you use the D-pad, and I hope they do. But yeah, I do think I would probably rather just play through with the Pro Controller just so I can feel whatever haptics they have implemented.
See, that's my thought, is that, I mean, if it works with the D-pad, then the SNES controller will work. Because it's no different than the Pro Controller in that regard. Yeah. It's just a Pro Controller without an analog stick. Anyway.
They're thinking of all the different options, because there's also like new and modern battle controls in the options as well. So they're thinking of a lot of new different things for this. I imagine it might be something that you can use regardless of whether it's like baked in or not.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But anybody have any final thoughts on Super Mario RPG before we wrap this up?
Uppies?
I think that nails it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ash.
I need to hear the rest of that soundtrack. I need it. I needs it.
I need to see Bowser dancing when you're leveling up. I want to know what that looks like.
Yep.
Yes, that's true. There's
oh, sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I'm most excited about the post-game challenges, because we've all played through this game before, and I think we're all going to breeze through it pretty quickly when it comes out on November 17th. But yeah, I want to see the post-game. The post-game for me is the big thing, because that's obviously all new, and I'm excited to see some of those challenges. I want to know how you defend against a boss that wipes your whole party out in one attack.
I do hope they rebalance.
Perfect.
Seriously.
Yep.
I do hope they've rebalanced Group Hug. That's the one thing. I hope Group Hug isn't as just broken as it was in the original. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that it is. I'm going to be honest. I think stuff like that will stay broken because they've tried to make it more accessible, not less. Yeah. And so I think that they're just going to keep those things as OP as they were. But anyway, that wraps it up. Thanks to Nintendo for letting us take literally a look at Super Mario RPG a little bit early. The game comes out November 17th. Stay tuned to GVG for much more on Super Mario RPG and all things Mario. Again, I'm going to remind you, if you haven't watched Brandon's Super Mario Wonder review, please go check that out. He put a ton of effort into it, and it is fantastic. It's wonderful.
Oh,
Don't yell at us, John. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like to support us, you can do so over at patreon.com/gvgaming or right here on YouTube. Like, subscribe. Hopefully that made the buttons twinkle. I think that's a thing now. Or you can hit that join button down below to become a YouTube member. Get all the same perks you would on Patreon if you'd prefer to stay here. But whether you're just watching, liking, subscribing, hanging out, leaving a comment, telling us we're wrong, we appreciate you all the same. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Until then, bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Meet again.